First of all, thanks for the opportunity to present today. As the Chair said, my name's Phil Hoare. I'm the Director of Infrastructure for Greater Shepparton City Council, and I've got two of my colleagues sitting down here who'd like to raise their hands, Marie and Ifty. I've got a civil engineering background, and I started in local government and then spent about 22 years in the water industry, so before coming back in September. So I know nothing about waste or this. I'm up here for my good looks and presentation skills, and these guys are the experts, so I'll probably refer to them if I have to. So in summary, the story is about a former landfill that is being transformed into a showcase of Australian native plants set in distinct themed gardens, wetlands and bushland that celebrate the history and diversity of our region. To our knowledge, it's the only botanic gardens that exists on a former landfill site. And if anyone knows of another one, you can stay quiet, because that's our claim to fame, and I don't care. In summary, my presentation will give a quick history of the site, talk a little bit about the inception and the development of the initiative, talk a little bit about the details of a master plan that's been established for the site, talk about the costs, talk about its successes, and also the challenges that we've got now with the site. And unfortunately, I won't have time for any questions at the end, so we'll move on. Just a little bit of context. Greater Shepparton City Council is located in north central Victoria. It's about 180 k's north of Melbourne and not far away from the Murray River. We cover an area of about 2,500 square kilometres, got a population of about 65,000–70,000 people, most of which live in the two major urban areas of the city of Shepparton and the adjoining town Mooroopna. We have the Goulburn River that runs between the two towns. If anyone's been there, it's probably the best place in Australia to go for a holiday. So come and see us. The rural land around is predominantly horticulture and dairy. That's our primary production. We've got lots of cereal crops, and lots of people are now moving into irrigated cereal crops as well. We do have the centre of a large gravity irrigation network that was one of the first ones established in Australia. Some of the iconic sort of things of the region are SPC, Shepparton Preserving Company, Campbell Soups, Furphy Foundry that make the Furphy tanks. We've got other major processing places like Unilever, Bega, Pactum and Thompson Fruit Packing. Fumble through my papers here. So the site itself is located on the floodplain, and it sits between the Broken River and the Goulburn River. It's about 22 hectares in total, and essentially it's in three parts. So in the northern part of the site is a native sort of bushland, and then there's the borrow pits that were there to build or cover the landfill, build the landfill, and then we've got the mound that I saw in the last slide that was left over from the landfill. Interestingly, you can see on the slide there that the site's only about 2.5 kilometres away from the GPOs of our two major towns, Shepparton and Mooroopna. The natural forest, or the forest around between the two townships, has an extensive shared path network. So it's really good in that area to be able to walk along the river and through the bush. And we've just been lucky enough to get a grant towards building a bridge across the Broken River, about $1.3 million, a shared path bridge that will connect the extensive shared path network that we currently have with the site. So that should open up a lot more activity at the site. I live just to the south of there, and I run along that river track and usually have my first heart attack just opposite the red line there. So it is a really nice spot. So the original area was settled in about 1893, and it was made up of small allotments of 5 to 10 acre blocks. It was known as the Kialla, not the Kialla, the Kialla settlement, and also known as Honeysuckle Park. And I'm led to believe that it was called Honeysuckle Park, Marie, because the honeysuckle banksias grew from the Strathbogie Ranges, which are about 35 k's away, all the way through to this point, which was a sandhill. So whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter, because no one else knows either. So this is a photo of the site during its operation. So the council acquired the land in 1972, and if you read some of the history written by some of the descendants of the people that were there, they kind of say that it was confiscated by the council, so I'm not sure which one of those is true either. But it operated as a landfill for about 15 years between 1972 and 1987. It operated under approval from the health department. It was an unlined trench and fill system, and the final outcome of that is a mound that is about 500 metres long, about 150 metres wide, and about 18 metres high. The landfill was closed in 1987 when council built a transfer station and started operations out of another landfill site, a remote landfill site about 35 k's from town at Cosgrove, where we still operate today. Interestingly enough, when I started in local government, I started with Shepparton City Council, and I was involved in building the transfer station when this one closed, but and it's still going. And we're just in the process of constructing the new part of Cosgrove that will give us another 40 years, 45 years life out there. So it's a longer term project. In that 20 years or so after it closed, it sat idle. And I'll go to the next slide. So it sat idle for about 20 years, and the only use really was use out there. Lots of the local four-wheel drive people got out there and burned up and down the hill, and I might have been known to ride up and down there on a motorbike myself. So it was after a while it eroded and was in fairly poor condition. In about 1995, when the council amalgamations happened, I imagine there was some due diligence process they went through, and this site come back on the radar. So it was included on the 10-year plan to go through a rehabilitation of the site. So the works then were designed, or the rehab works were designed in the mid-2000s, and the works didn't start until about 2009, 2010. So it kind of went just beyond the 10-year plan. It did have, at that point in time, after the rehabilitation works, an ongoing aftercare and management plan, IFTI tells me, so we operate in accordance with that. But it also coincided, importantly, with a push from a group of people in the community to establish a botanical gardens in Shepparton. And initially they wanted to locate the botanical gardens at another site known as the help me out, IFTI, it's the International Village, where we had lots of different buildings from around the world. We had, windmills from all over the world and that sort of thing. But the council was pretty low on interest, if you like, at that point in time, and there was a bit of debate about whether it should be built or not. Anyway, the community members that were quite passionate about it ended up running for council and got elected to council, so that gave it a bit more oomph. There was two main proponents. One got elected in 2005 and one got elected in 2008. And together with the local regional waste recovery group, which I don't know whether Kate's in here or not, but when we were doing the works, at that point in time, I applied for a grant and got a grant to help us develop up a longer term plan or evaluate plan that ended up in the Botanic Gardens. So the initial works that were done in the rehabilitation were primarily around fixing the batters up, putting a 500mm cap over the whole site with 300mm topsoil. They created the walking tracks that were part of the master plan, and drainage. Erosion is a big problem. And also constructed the lookout, which is a really major feature on the site. It's about another 6 metres high on top of the 18-metre mound. And did some work on the wetlands to reshape turn what was the borrow pits into what has become the wetlands. At that point in time, there was also on the end of the site an international mountain bike track created, and that hosted a couple of national or international events before it sort of ran into a few troubles with erosion and safety and that sort of thing, and no longer continues. So we established the council established, with the help of our 2 new councillors, a Section 86 committee, which essentially it was set up as the governance model to run this development of this site. And they had 5 main functions, and they were to prepare and develop a management plan, to minimise or maximise the sustainable use of the facility, to minimise public liability, to encourage public interest and maximise involvement and participation of the community in the development and use of the site, and to establish and implement policies for successful management of the facilities. So that was the Section 86 Committee's role. Council maintained a role in maintenance of the site in terms of control of pests and some weeds, and safety and repairs and that sort of thing. So the master plan that's up there now essentially focuses on the 3 areas that I've talked about: the national bushland, the wetlands, and the honeysuckle, what became known as the honeysuckle rise after the honeysuckle banksia. So the vision of the master plan is to provide an inspirational, sustainable and unique landscape, showcasing local, regional and other native plants for enjoyment, education, tourism and community strengthening. So the committee is quite strong on each of those aspects of the vision. Now the themed gardens, which have been built on the rise, are there to reflect the cultural, environmental, historical and agricultural characteristics of our region, and the story of change of the area over time. So that on the rise itself, the main features are the lookout. There's a food garden, a refugee garden, a residence garden and a terrace garden. On the river plain, down on the bottom part, there's the turtle garden, the river walk, the billabong walk, the weaving garden, and I'll talk a bit more about the weaving garden on the next slide, and a natural play area. So lots of there's lots of art incorporated in the site, and it's all made out of recycled materials. So there's a big fish that the kids can come and pull a cord, and the fish flaps its wings, or whatever you call them, fins. It's really impressive what they've done on the site with a lot of recycled materials. So the plan, and I've been made to bring a few of these brochures along by the committee, and so I'll leave them out the front, and hopefully they'll all disappear, because otherwise it'll be a waste of material. But it sort of sets out some of the facts and figures around the site. But importantly, it sets out the guiding principles that the committee adopts in developing the sites, and it is community involvement, sustainability, use of Australian plants, accessibility, use of local and recycled materials, local themes, healthy lifestyles, tourism, appreciation of our rivers and public art. So I must admit, in my 20 years in the water industry, I only lived about 2 kilometres from this site. I never went near it, but when I came back to council, I went out there and I was really surprised at what I saw and what I had seen happen. Okay, so on the slide here, there's you might notice on the top left-hand corner there, there's a guy that's standing there supervising a work for the dole scheme. I think that's Ifty standing under the shade while all the others are doing the work. But It's really interesting, some of the things that are depicted on these slides, and down the bottom left-hand corner is what they call the Terrace Gardens. And when you know what you're looking at, and I've had it explained to me, there's the green shrubs that run through the middle represent the Goulburn River. We have, as I said before, a major gravity irrigation system. Our whole area, the Goulburn Murray Irrigation District, runs off a gravity irrigation district. And pity I'm not here talking about that, because I could tell you heaps more about that. But the bit through the middle, the grey stone, is the what we call the main eastern channel. It is a major channel, and there's lots of feeder channels that run off that onto the farms and paddocks. And it's actually surprisingly how much it does look like the site when you fly across it in an aeroplane. You know, the patchwork quilt of different paddocks and farms. And all the plants in there are sort of local native plants that were grown by the Indigenous people as food sources in the past. On the bottom right-hand side is the what they call the weaving garden, and that's also very interesting. The plants that are growing there are what the Aboriginal people used to use for weaving in their culture, and the cauldrons that you can see in the back represent middens. So there's lots of stories behind each one of these gardens, and it's really impressive to stand and go through and get a presentation of what they actually mean. This part, that part where the bottom bit is actually in a floodplain, and it gets flooded quite regularly. So if you're ready, eyes up, and I'll click on the next one, and it's a bit of a flyover. So. So that's a quick look at the site, and when you go in there, it is really impressive. There are some facts and figures around. We contribute as a council, about 120,000 to the site each year for maintenance. There's much more than that gets contributed by the committee and in-kind support. So. Lots and lots of work done. We estimate that it's cost us about $2 million to date in development costs. There's lots of, the group says that they estimate about 20,000 visitors to the site per year, and with the new bridge that we've just got that will open it up, that should significantly increase. There's lots of school groups, there's lots of fitness groups that go out there and use the mound to run up and down, so it's really good. There's been lots of social enterprises and people involved, from prisoners to work for the dole schemes to go out and help. There's no shortage of people to help in a volunteer sense. The problem is getting the people who have the knowledge to supervise and control them. So there's lots of other challenges. The site has no power, no potable water, no sewer, no public toilets, so there's ongoing erosion, and drainage is always an issue. And probably above all, the original committee that had the passion and the drive and is still operating this is getting a little bit tired, and is looking to council to pull back a little bit and become an advisory committee, and for council to step back in and take control and manage the site. So, that's creating lots of pressure, and in a rate cap world, when there's lots of competition for the dollars, it's quite difficult. So overall, it's been a huge success, I think. It has produced the iconic site, and it's getting lots of visitation. It's achieving its aims and its vision. It's won a number of awards. However, it has significant challenges. So thanks for the opportunity to present. Unfortunately, as I said, I've got no time for questions. and I hope it's raised a little bit of interest and given you some thought for how sites can be used after they close.